Welcome back to Inside the System. I'm Jasmine Logan, and I'm joined by Emeritus Political Science Professor Dr. David Canervo. Today we'll be covering the most recent media coverage in American politics, including the Super Tuesday primary results, the State of the Union address, and the potential ban on the popular social media platform TikTok. So stay tuned. First on the agenda today is the Super Tuesday primary results. On March 5th, we had the biggest day for primary elections across the nation. Donald Trump and President Biden were the clear frontrunners for the Republican and Democratic elections. Following Super Tuesday, Nikki Haley suspended her presidential campaign, clearing the way for a rematch between Trump and Biden in November. Let's take a look at what Haley and some of her supporters had to say following her loss. CNN's Jessica Dean reports.
As she announced the suspension of her presidential campaign on Wednesday, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley had a clear message for her rival.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that.
Where will Haley's support go now that she's exited the race? In Virginia, where she captured nearly 35% of the vote on Super Tuesday, we caught up with voters to ask, what will you do in November?
Now that she's out and it's Trump versus Biden, what do you think?
Oh, no question, Biden. We cannot have another 4 years of that man.
I, at this point, can't answer that question. I think that this country can do better than the choice that we've been given. And I don't know how we can change that, but I think it's going to be a lot of difficult, thoughtful, for people to decide what to do in the future.
I think people are looking closely, at the vice presidential candidate because it's a very probable possibility that they will be president by the end of the 4 years.
So far, the former president has offered little in the way of an olive branch to Haley or her supporters, writing on social media, quote, Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion. After weeks of lobbing insults in their direction,
Nikki Haley has made an unholy alliance with rhinos, never-Trumpers. The people behind Nikki are pro-amnesty. You like that?
CNN exit polling found among Haley supporters across 5 states that 19% say they'd be satisfied with Trump as the nominee and 79% dissatisfied. And yet her supporters could be crucial for Trump's chances of winning back the White House, especially in battleground states where the margins are likely to be slim. But still, some voters told us now that Haley is out, neither Trump nor Biden will win their support.
I'm not going to vote for either one, Biden or Trump. I'd love to vote for her again. He's just lost me in this past few years, and it's mostly his attitude about foreign policy and Ukraine and the chaos. Biden, I just think, is not fit for office.
I think it is not a sure thing that Donald Trump is going to win the general election because if you're a voter like myself, I'm going to write her in. I am not going to go to vote for Trump. I don't think he's going to be able to corral Nikki Haley supporters and independent voters back.
So Dr. Canervo, what did these Super Tuesday primaries reveal in terms of our Republican and Democratic frontrunners?
Well, I think the outcome of the election showed that, of course, Biden and Trump are both very strong frontrunners at this time. Mm-hmm. What is a little bit interesting to me is the fact that there are a number of people out in the population who would prefer different choices. Their thinking is that we've been through Biden and Trump once before. We've done that, and so why do it again? And yet, despite this desire for new, younger candidates, what we're seeing is that both candidates are overwhelmingly, of course, getting support from their respective parties. Mm-hmm. Biden, of course, had no real opposition to speak of in his primary elections, but Nikki Haley was a good candidate for the Republicans. She's someone who the polls showed would beat Biden pretty handily if she were the nominee of the party. And yet, Donald Trump, with his name recognition, was able to overcome her very handily in the primaries. During Super Tuesday, Nikki Haley won one state, Vermont. And earlier, she had won the District of Columbia primary. And so beyond that, she really hasn't had enough support, unfortunately for her, to present much of a challenge.
I agree. I like the point that you made. A lot of people are upset with the way the country is going in terms of politics, and they're upset about our candidates, and they don't want another rematch between Trump and Biden. And yet here we are. And I can't help but wonder why that is.
Well, I think it's name recognition partly. Partly, of course, in the Democratic Party, Biden had no real significant challenge. Congressman Phillips ran a campaign, but nobody knew who he was. He didn't have apparently much money because he didn't publicize himself well. And so there was no real choice other than Biden in the Democrats. Robert Kennedy Jr., of course, started out in the primaries as well as a Democrat, did not do well either. And so he's decided to run an independent campaign. On the Republican side, again, Nikki Haley had good money, good funding with some big people, showing her a lot of dollars to spend. But at the same time, Trump was just too popular. There are very few people, I suspect, in the country who don't know Donald Trump. And as a former president, people seemed to think he had done well, and so wanted to see him on the ticket again.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And, you know, although they both did well in their respective primaries, I do think they're both going to face some unique challenges in terms of the general election. And CNN's Jeff Zeleny reports on that.
Tonight, the curtain finally goes up on a historic presidential rematch: Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Emerging from Super Tuesday primaries as the effective nominees of their parties. But there are warning signs in winning, with both men facing distinct challenges of rebuilding their coalitions. Nikki Haley, the last standing Republican rival, suspended her campaign without offering an endorsement.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that.
After months of warning Republicans about Trump's vulnerabilities, she bluntly said the burden is on the former president to win over her supporters and unify the party.
At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing.
Any fence mending got off to a rocky start, with Trump saying on social media Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion. President Biden struck a different note and extended his hand, saying, "Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley's supporters. I want to be clear. There is a place for them in my campaign." It's far from certain where Haley voters ultimately will go, but an analysis of CNN exit polls from 5 states found only 19% said they would be satisfied with Trump as the nominee, and 79% dissatisfied. In the closing days of the primary, voters expressed the challenges of unity.
Trump can't win without her supporters, and calling her names isn't going to help him win.
Do you worry that some of her supporters may go to Biden?
Maybe third party.
8 months before the general election, the Republican Party is rallying around Trump.
November 5th is going to go down as the single most important day in the history of our country.
Senator Mitch McConnell, who hasn't spoken to Trump in more than 3 years, offered his endorsement, saying, "It should come as no surprise that as the nominee, he will have my support." Tonight, after a string of Democratic primary victories, President Biden is preparing to make his case at the State of the Union address on Thursday, a primetime opportunity to tackle myriad challenges he faces to win re-election. Biden easily swept away long-shot rivals like Dean Phillips, but a series of protest votes made clear he faces a task of uniting Democrats too, like in Minnesota on Tuesday, where uncommitted received 19% of the vote. With a general election contest finally taking shape, history will be tested anew, as Trump seeks to become the first president since Grover Cleveland was voted out of office to be sent back for a second term.
So with all the potential challenges these candidates are facing, could this leave room for an independent candidate to have a real shot of the presidency?
Well, of course, an independent has never won the presidency throughout our history, and so it would be quite a shock if that were to be the case. At the same time, though, the primary independent this time is Robert Kennedy Jr. 30 years ago, the Kennedy name was very important and was almost magical in terms of winning office. It's not so much anymore because, of course, generations have passed. There's not much remembrance about John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy Sr. And so Robert Kennedy Jr. has quite a hill to climb if he's going to be successful in the presidential race. He has been somewhat controversial. He's an anti-vaxxer and has also taken some positions that have not been exactly in the mainstream. And so that's been a problem. And his family, interestingly, is not supporting his candidacy either. They have essentially apologized to President Biden for Robert Jr.'s candidacy. So all of that tends to not bode very well, obviously, for Kennedy Jr.'s chance at the presidency.
I see what you mean. I do think him running for office, though, could change things, whether or not he actually does become our next president. I do think that could affect how people are voting. With the Haley voters, some of them are saying that the ones who are dissatisfied if Trump wins this election, some of them are saying that they're going to go towards Biden and vote Democrat this year. Some of them are saying they're just going to vote for an independent candidate because they don't know what else to do. And so I'm interested to see how those people who are split, those people who don't want another Trump and Biden rematch, how voting for a potential independent could affect our next president.
That's certainly true. It's a situation, I think, where we have voters unhappy in both parties with their candidates, and they are looking for something new, and someone new who can present some ideas that they can attach themselves to as voters, and to try to find someone closer to their generation, obviously, as well. And so Robert Kennedy Jr., while, as I said, he has a very high mountain to climb, nevertheless does present some opening to those who are looking for a third choice.
Definitely.
And he is someone, if there is going to be a third choice, who might very well win enough votes. The problem is he may not win enough votes to actually win the election, but he could hurt one candidate or the other.
Exactly.
And of course, as a Democrat, the family being a Democrat, it could be that he would hurt President Biden and help throw the election to Trump. Or it could be that if he were to win some states, the election would go to the House of Representatives because neither Biden nor Trump would get 270 electoral votes needed to win. And if that's the case, the House would choose with one state getting one vote, and there are more Republican-controlled states than Democrat, and so again, that would lead to Trump winning the election, most likely.
Yeah. So I'm very interested to see how all these different factors are going to play out towards the upcoming election in November. But after this short break, we'll be back to talk about the State of the Union address.
After you joined our family, it was like, I really do feel complete now.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Last week, President Joe Biden gave his annual State of the Union address, where he discussed some of the country's concerns and made his intentions clear for the future on some pressing issues. Let's hear from White House correspondent Julia Benbrook on the subject.
The Biden campaign says that during the president's State of the Union address, it had its most lucrative hours of online fundraising since the re-election launch. At times, the president's speech took on the tone of a campaign event. President Joe Biden mentioned his predecessor more than a dozen times during his State of the Union address Thursday night.
Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, meanwhile, my predecessor.
During his speech, Biden pushed for abortion rights, gun safety legislation, and immigration reform. He called out Republicans for refusing to take up the bipartisan border security bill after former President Donald Trump urged them not to pass it.
And if my predecessor is watching, instead of paying politics and pressuring members of Congress to block the bill, join me in telling the Congress to pass it. We can do it together.
Biden's address served as an unofficial kickoff for the general election that is still 8 months away. The president travels to the battleground state of Pennsylvania for a campaign event on Friday as he prepares to take on Trump, who is pushing back against Biden's message.
We cannot take it any longer as a country.
This as the Republican National Committee faces a shakeup. Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is stepping down.
It is a little bittersweet to be with all of you here today as I step down as chair after 7 years of working with you all.
McDaniel will be replaced with Trump's endorsed candidate, North Carolina GOP Chairman Michael Whatley. And the former president's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, will serve as co-chair. With Trump all but clinching the GOP nomination this week, he'll now be able to access the RNC's data on its voters, as well as fundraising infrastructure and ground operation, far earlier than he was able to in 2016. These resources are critical to Trump's campaign as they try to build out teams in key battleground states. Reporting at the White House, I'm Julia Benbrook.
How has the president's most recent speech affected his public perception?
Well, he went into the State of the Union address on Thursday night with the need to prove to people that he's not one step away from Alzheimer's or a casket. He needed to indicate to people that he had some life in him, and he did that. He was dramatic. He spoke loudly, forcefully, and for those who watched the speech, which of course would probably be primarily Democrats, I think he did give them some evidence that he is still alive and well and able to carry out his job. Now the question is whether, of course, any Republicans or very many Republicans watched him and whether that had an impact on them. And my suspicion is that those who saw him weren't necessarily that impressed if they were Republicans. They saw someone who they don't necessarily believe. About 2/3 of Trump supporters believe that Biden won the presidency illegally. And so as a result, they don't see him as a legitimate president anyway. So there are lots of things yet that Biden has to overcome. Probably Biden is going to win only a very small percentage of Republican votes. He'll win some of those, as you mentioned earlier, of the Nikki Haley supporters, But some of those will still vote for Trump, some will vote for Kennedy or not vote at all.
Yeah.
And that leaves then Biden with the task of not only bringing together all of his Democratic Party members, but also getting as large a percentage of the independent voters as possible, rather than losing them to Robert Kennedy. So that's the chore. He's going to, of course, he's currently touring the country, taking a victory lap, so to speak, after his State of the Union speech, feeling good about it and feeling pretty good about the responses, I think, that happened as a result of it. And what he's trying to do is reinforce that support among Democrats, but also as many independents as he can pull to his side as well.
I agree. I do think the response was mainly positive, especially after that speech. He's pulled in so many donations and he's gotten more support. I think it gave a lot of reassurance, especially following Special Counsel Robert Hur's report on his memory and his age. I think him addressing some of the country's concerns, especially in terms of the Israel and Hamas war, could be beneficial. A lot of people have been unhappy about how that's going and been voting uncommitted in the Democratic primaries and protests, hoping for a ceasefire. So I do think him talking about sending aid to Gaza and things like that is beneficial in terms of his potential reelection. I think those are things that people care about, and I'm glad that he is addressing it.
Yes, certainly. It was important for him to address. And the hope is, of course, that with the humanitarian aid that we're giving to Gaza, both through airdrops and then eventually through the port that we're building in Gaza, that will make some difference, that the Arab Americans who are going to vote in this country will see that perhaps Biden would be the best choice for them to try to help support the Arabs in the Middle East.
I agree, and I guess we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out further. But after this short break, we'll be back to talk about the potential ban on TikTok.
Wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you as you bring our colorful stories to the world.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
U.S. lawmakers are pushing for legislation regarding the popular social media app TikTok. The owner of TikTok has two choices: sell the app or it will be banned in the U.S. Ivan Rodriguez reports.
The threats posed by TikTok are real.
The U.S. House and Energy Commerce Committee voting unanimously to advance a bill prohibiting TikTok from U.S. app stores unless it's spun off from its China-linked parent company, ByteDance. Lawmakers have long feared the social media platform may pose a Chinese spying risk.
The editor-in-chief of ByteDance is himself the secretary of the very Chinese Communist Party cell embedded in the leadership of ByteDance. And his duty, according to him, is to make sure that TikTok and other products abide by correct political direction.
TikTok CEO testified to lawmakers last year that the app poses no threat to Americans. The company is now mounting a push against the bill, including trying to mobilize its user base. Multiple congressional staffers say House offices were flooded with phone calls Thursday, many of them upset teens. The ACLU also opposes the legislation, calling it a violation of free speech.
We're talking about foreign ownership and control of an app. And once that foreign ownership is addressed, not only will people be able to continue to say whatever they want on the app, you'll also have freedom of thought, freedom from fear that your thought might be manipulated because of the opaque algorithm.
The bill next moves to a floor vote. If enacted, it would give ByteDance 165 days to sell the app. I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Many people are responding negatively to this news, saying that this ban is a potential infringement on their freedom of speech. Do you think there's a case to make there?
I don't think that the ban on TikTok, if it occurs, is necessarily a danger for freedom of speech. There are plenty of other alternatives which people can share their ideas, whether it's Facebook or X or some of the other social media that are out there. Or, of course, they write letters to the editor of newspapers, or they can do other things as well. So I'm not concerned about the freedom of speech issue. There are plenty of other options. At the same time, though, of course, TikTok, because it is owned by a Chinese company and ultimately controlled by the Chinese government, there are, I think, legitimate concerns about what kind of data the Chinese might be gathering on the United States. I must confess, I've never been a TikTok user, and I don't use social media that much, partly because of my age, I suppose. But what's also true is that I don't know that beyond things such as names, addresses, maybe telephone numbers, that that much really crucial data and important data are necessarily shared on TikTok. But there may be more than I'm aware of. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm also not positive in terms of the data, how much of a concern that is. I do know that millennials and Gen Z, the vast majority of them, use TikTok, I would say, almost daily. It's a great source of news and information for them, and a lot of them, it's how they stay up to date on current events. And TikTok has played a role in kind of unifying, I feel like, the younger generation and almost like mobilizing them in terms of protests and speaking out on issues that they feel are important. And so this ban in the wake of that, I think is what's probably receiving the most backlash because of how utilized it is in that sense.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that TikTok was so popular among younger folks, and I think that's fine. And I don't know that in most cases they would have the kind of data that would be terribly revealing of anything much to the Chinese government. So nevertheless, though, I am always suspicious of the Chinese government and what they might be mining public opinion for, whether they might be trying to interfere with the election, for example, through TikTok. So that does trouble me a little bit, and I would not be bothered by a ban, though it sounds like many of your generation certainly would be.
Definitely. Is there even really a precedent for a ban like this?
I don't know that there is precedent for a ban like this. Certainly newspapers are not banned. Now, of course, television and radio stations are controlled by the FCC, which is the federal governmental agency. And so certainly there are bans on certain words and content, but I'm not aware of there being a total ban on a particular station, for example.
I'm interested to see how this could move forward, because the owner of TikTok was kind of given an ultimatum, and it's either sell the app because they are worried about the foreign ownership and how that is affecting us in the US, or the app will be banned in the US. And I'm interested to see how that's going to play out, and I'm interested to see more so how people are going to respond to that if they do move forward with a ban.
Yes. And I don't know that that's going to affect public opinion other than young folks. And it may be that there'll be an alternative that many young people will simply move to.
Definitely, and we'll just have to wait and see on that one. That's all we have for you guys today, so thanks for joining us, and make sure to tune in again in a couple weeks.